place. Of course, I was filled with a revulsion that I think any reasonable person would have.
Also tonight, as winter weather returns with a vengeance around the country, supports for people experiencing homelessness come under renewed scrutiny.
We need a provincial or national strategy that supports people so that they don't become homeless in the first place.
And doctors sound the alarm over the off-label use of a diabetes drug.
It's not something that someone should be taking to lose that 10 pounds before they go for their wedding or their beach vacation. This is for people who are sick.
That's later, but first. Another execution in Iran is drawing widespread condemnation, especially in the UK. British Iranian citizen Ali Reza Akbari was convicted of being a spy and hanged. The CBC's Jamie Strachan has more on the reaction to his killing.
Iranian state media announcing the execution by hanging of Iranian-British national Ali Reza Akbari. The exact timing of the execution is unknown.
When I found out earlier this morning from the officials in Tehran that this had taken place, of course I was filled with a revulsion that I think any reasonable person would have.
James Cleverly is Britain's foreign minister. The British government responded with a number of diplomatic measures, including temporarily withdrawing Britain's ambassador from Iran. And Cleverly promised more to come.
We are sending today a clear message to the Iranian regime that we are watching closely what they do. We will respond robustly to any actions that they take.
Akbari is a former top Iranian defense official and has not been seen publicly since his arrest in 2019 for allegedly spying for the UK. Iranian television aired video of Akbari's confession, but Akbari was heard on an audio recording saying the confession came after hours of torture. No details of his trial were ever made public. Vidant Patel is a U.S. State Department spokesperson.
We are greatly disturbed by the reports that Mr. Akbari was drugged, tortured while in custody, interrogated for thousands of hours, and forced to make false concessions.
His family also rejected allegations that Akbari ever acted as a spy. Raman Forghani is Akbari's nephew.
It's been horrific few days. The character that I knew, the person that was devoted to the country and the regime itself, the person that was involved with the system from the very beginning of its foundation, would not contemplate to do anything that would jeopardize or harm either the regime nor the population.
Akbari's execution comes as the Iranian regime continues to deal with nationwide unrest, which began last September after 22-year-old Mahsa Amini died while in custody after allegedly violating strict rules related to wearing a hijab. Iran has blamed foreign countries for fueling the protests. Sanam Vakil is the deputy director of Chatham House's Middle East and North Africa program. She says Akbari's execution sends a message to protesters and the world.
It tells us very directly that the Islamic Republic has no intention of reform or meeting protesters' demands. It tells us that a purge of the political establishment is well underway, and there is a hardline conservative monopoly of power.
Dozens of protesters have been handed death sentences in recent months. And last weekend, Iran executed 2 protesters charged with killing security personnel, raising fears for the thousands who have been arrested since the unrest began last fall. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
Warm socks, gloves, sleeping bags, all essential items for people experiencing homelessness. Today in Toronto, volunteers handed out thousands of kits with these items and more to help through sub-zero temperatures. As Philip Lee Shannock reports, in a city where the shelter system is under significant strain, these kits can mean the difference between life and death.
Socks, deodorant, shampoo, comb, Kleenex.
Jody Steinhauer is founder of Project Winter Survival. The group puts together backpacks and warm clothing and essentials for those living on the streets.
Nobody chooses to be homeless. Like I always say, homelessness is you or me with really crappy luck.
She says homeless people need a stable place to stay first.
If you don't have an address, And if you don't know where you're sleeping tonight, how the heck are you worrying about going out and getting a job?
She says they'll hand out 3,000 survival kits, but shelters and outreach facilities requested almost 10 times that number this year.
During the heavy wet snowfall.
This man, who did not give his name, appreciated the kit Steinhauer gave him after the winter storm that came through.
I've been sleeping between two, let's say, moist sleeping bags.
But he says he prefers living rough to a city shelter. Gord Tanner is the general manager of Toronto's Shelter Support and Housing Administration.
9 times out of 10, if you were to ask them, are looking for an affordable, safe place to call home.
He says about 9,000 people are staying in shelters on any given night, and about 100 are turned away. And that could get worse as 5 temporary shelters could close.
Although very helpful during COVID-19 and at times when we have challenges with capacity, is not a long-term solution to this issue.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the city operates 23 temporary shelter sites, some in hotels, that provide about a third of the city's shelter capacity, or about 3,000 beds. Now Tanner says those contracts are coming up.
Some of those hotel owners are deciding and choosing to go back to the hotel business, and that makes those properties no longer available for us.
He says there are plans to add more capacity. 700 shelter beds were opened in the last 2 months as part of the city's winter plan. But Tanner says the city wants to prioritize investing in long-term permanent solutions to homelessness, which is a national issue.
Because these issues aren't playing out just in Toronto, they're playing out in communities right across this country. So we need a provincial or national strategy that supports people so that they don't become homeless in the first place.
And he says that means better wages, affordable housing, and help for those with mental health and addiction issues. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's premiers are calling on Ottawa to strengthen the bail system. Premiers from all 13 provinces and territories have signed a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau demanding immediate action. The letter specifically mentions changing the rules around whether someone on bail can have a firearm. It comes after an Ontario provincial police constable was shot dead last month. The accused was out on bail. California is still being hammered with wind, rain, and snow because of a series of atmospheric rivers that started in late December. They're causing power outages, mudslides, and widespread flooding. At least 19 people have died. For more, we spoke to CBC's Susanna De Silva. She's driving through California. Susanna, you're near Sacramento. What's the situation there?
Well, where I am right now, they have a little bit of a break, but if you go 10 minutes down the highway, you're probably going to find some more stormy conditions and torrential downpours, and that's what we've seen as we've driven up here. You'll see vast areas that are completely flooded. It'll be almost sunny at times, and then these torrential downpours, and that is the concern because, of course, there are parts of this state that have received their entire average rainfall in the last couple of weeks. So ground is saturated, the rivers are all running very high, the power companies have been struggling, they restore some power, but then there was heavy rain this morning in the Sacramento area that has knocked more power out. So it has certainly been a struggle as they try to keep that going. And there is still more flooding. People are keeping a very close eye on rivers. Everywhere you go, you see people stop taking pictures because some of these places have not had any water for a long time or very low. So they're running very high and people are stopping to take a look. But there are still some that have breached their banks and others that are still at the risk of flooding. And officials telling people to be careful. The majority of deaths have happened in and around the Sacramento area, people overtaken by fast-moving water in their vehicle, and so they are telling people not to get complacent.
It's been a harrowing couple weeks then for people there. So what's next for them? Is there a break on the horizon?
There is a bit of a break. There is the potential for some more storms. They've seen 8 atmospheric rivers so far in the last couple of weeks. The issue, though, some of these areas now seeing flooding, they're actually seeing flooding from water that fell from last week's storm because it takes a while as it makes its way through watersheds, down rivers. So they are telling people, the storms may end sometime next week, but they could still see flooding for several more days. So there is still a ways to go. And, we spoke to a farmer who said his fields are not going to be ready to even be touched for at least a month or more because they have to completely dry out. So some of his crops may be delayed, and there just is a lot of cleanup that is going to happen once they do finally get that break.
Okay, Susanna, stay safe out there. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
CBC's Susanna De Silva near Sacramento, California. Lawyers for U.S. President Joe Biden have found yet more classified documents in his Wilmington, Delaware home. Another 6 pages were found during a search of a private library. That's in addition to documents found in his garage and in a Washington office he used before winning the presidency. The Attorney General has appointed a special counsel to investigate the matter.
What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
That's the sound of thousands of demonstrators marching through the mud and rain to the German village of Lützerath. They're protesting against plans to demolish the town to make way for the expansion of an open-pit coal mine. Police confronted the protesters in riot gear, swinging batons and using water cannon, trying to push them off the property and away from barriers. Earlier this week, police cleared out hundreds of people from the village. Some of them had been living in abandoned buildings for more than 2 years. Among those demonstrating today was Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg.
What happens in Lützerath doesn't stay in Lützerath. Germany, as one of the biggest polluters in the world, has an enormous responsibility. They need to be held accountable, and that is why we are here.
The mine owners, RWE Energy, got approval for the expansion in a deal with the German government. That deal allows Lützerath to be demolished, but forbids mining expansion in 5 surrounding villages. The Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, was hit with another barrage of Russian rocket attacks this morning, once again targeting critical infrastructure. Rockets also struck an apartment building in the city of Dnipro, killing at least 5 people. Search and rescue teams are still combing through the rubble looking for victims. At least 60 people, including 12 children, were injured in the attack. A top Ukrainian general claims his forces shot down 21 of 33 Russian missiles fired today. And British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the UK will send Challenger 2 tanks and artillery to Ukraine, making it the first Western country to supply main battle tanks to Ukraine. The initial commitment is for about a dozen of the 20-year-old tanks. Ukraine is hoping other European countries will provide more. Poland says it can export German-made Leopard tanks, but needs Berlin's approval to do so. And since the start of the war in Ukraine, Serbia's president, Alexander Vučić, has been performing a complicated balancing act, maintaining a good relationship with the West, which holds the keys to Serbia's long-sought EU membership, and Russia, a country with which Serbia has long-standing political, economic, and cultural ties. As Rebecca Collar tells us, some worry the balancing act is allowing Russia to stoke conflict in the Balkans.
Tensions are high in northern Kosovo, home to around 50,000 ethnic Serbs. Last month, Serbs blocked roads with massive trucks and farm equipment. The barricades came down, but tensions spilled over again this month after 2 Serbs were allegedly shot by an off-duty member of Kosovo's security force. The details of the incident are unclear, but thousands of Serbs took to the streets in Kosovo, holding Serbian flags and signs that read, "Protect Serbian life." Kosovo is accusing Russia of supporting Serbia and stoking the tensions. In an interview with German television, Kosovo's President Albin Kurti pointed to weapons supplied by Russia to Serbia.
Serbia was historically client regime of Kremlin. And
Moscow has been seeking influence in the Balkans by supporting Serbia, blocking war crimes tribunals against Serbs, and UN membership for Kosovo. But Serbia also wants to join the EU, which has been putting pressure on Serbia to get in line with its policies on Russia. Angelush Marina with the European Council on Foreign Relations says Serbia's president's balancing act may be dangerous.
By constantly trying to play both sides, and I mean the West versus Russia, he has dug himself so deep that he can't just turn around and say, we are not listening to whatever Russia has to say.
Analysts say Russia wants to distract from its war in Ukraine and could use the deep religious and ethnic fault lines in the Balkans to do it. In December, Russia's state broadcaster aired testimonies of Serbs who were tortured and raped during the Balkans War in the 1990s. But it was the atrocities being committed by Serbian forces that brought NATO military intervention to the region. And in 1999, in Kosovo, led to the most tense standoff between the West and Russia since the end of the Cold War. An event significant enough in the Russian consciousness that in 2020, Vladimir Putin claimed he played a key role in the incident. In his New Year's address, the president of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, praised his country's achievements and compared himself to a wolf that could not be tamed by international pressure. Serbia gets around 85% of its fuel from Russia and has a free trade agreement with Moscow. Interrupting that could have a massive economic impact. But the EU is Serbia's biggest trading partner, and EU membership has long been a top priority for Serbians. However, a poll last spring showed that for the first time, more Serbs were against EU membership than for it. Marina says despite that,
speaking, I don't think, in Serbia, you would find many people who see Russia as an alternative to the EU. I think everyone at the end of the day would like to much more willingly move towards EU and the West rather than Russia or China, for example.
But it shows that while Russia hasn't opened a military confrontation with the West in the Balkans, it has managed to create a divide in the minds of the people. Rebecca Collard for CBC News, Berlin.
In Portugal today, thousands of teachers from across the country marched through Lisbon, calling for higher wages and better working conditions. Teachers there make an average of $2,900 per month, but those on the lowest pay scale make about half of that. The teachers say they can't keep up with the rising cost of living. Partial strikes since December have disrupted the current semester. Portugal's education minister has said he might force teachers back to work. Well, it's a drug everybody wants, and those who need are struggling to find. Ozempic was developed to treat diabetes, but after widespread speculation celebrities were using it to lose weight, it went viral on social media and demand skyrocketed. The CBC's Christine Birak now on some of the risks.
My goal weight is 135 pounds. Between the hype on social media and the relentless TV ads. Questions are swirling around Ozempic, originally a type 2 diabetes medication.
And you may lose weight in the same way.
So how well does it work for weight loss, and who should be taking it?
This is an important medication for us because it changed the entire playing field.
Dr. Sean Wharton specializes in diabetes and weight management at his clinic in Burlington, Ontario. He emphasizes obesity is a complex medical problem, not a moral failing. Aside from bariatric surgery, there's no highly effective treatment. Wharton studied Ozempic for the drug maker. Studies funded mostly by Novo Nordisk found, in combination with a low-calorie diet and exercise, most people who injected themselves with the drug weekly lost between 5 to 15% of their body weight after a year.
Over the past 5 years only, we've had this new field of medication that really works. Patients are finally getting some relief.
It is gratifying to see widespread knowledge now surrounding these medicines. Of course, that comes with a concern.
Dr. Daniel Drucker is a researcher at Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto. In scientific circles, he's a big deal. His work laid the foundation for this new field of diabetes and weight loss medication using a drug called semaglutide.
And it works through receptors on cells.
Semaglutide tricks the brain by mimicking a hormone that regulates hunger and food intake. It slows down the emptying of the stomach so people feel fuller longer, potentially leading to weight loss. But studies show a long list of side effects, which can include stomach pain, vomiting, and fatigue. The drug also increases the risk of thyroid cancer and suicidal behavior. Drucker says people need to be cautious.
You know, these are medicines. They're not harmless candies that people take, and medicines can have side effects and need to be used appropriately.
Doctors also note the weight only stays off as long as you keep taking the drug.
I can understand why people want to believe that there's a quick and easy solution, but it's not there.
Dr. Nav Prasad is a Canada Research Chair in Health Justice. He says fad diets also offer quick weight loss that doesn't last, and warns diet drugs have come and gone.
We've seen it happen many times where there were these heralded wonder drugs that turned out not to work or to harm or kill people.
In France, diet drug Mediator, which started as a type 2 diabetes treatment, is now being blamed for 2,000 deaths from heart valve problems. Another drug called Fen-Pen caused similar issues in the 90s, and others led to psychiatric side effects, including suicides.
I got to the point where I was about 360 pounds. I was hypertensive, had severe sleep apnea.
Ian Patton works for Obesity Canada, which receives funding from Novo Nordisk. He's been taking Ozempic for 2 years and has lost about 50 pounds. Patton says for him, the benefits of easing other obesity-related health problems outweighs the risk from the drug. But
it's not something that people should be taking just to lose weight. It's not something that someone should be taking to lose that 10 pounds before they go, for their wedding or their beach vacation. This is for people who are sick.
Bottom line, Ozempic has risks, and it's meant for people struggling with a disease, not for simply losing a few pounds. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
All week, Prince Edward Islanders have been paying tribute to John Joe Sark. He died last Sunday. Sark was a Mi'kmaq spiritual leader, an activist, and passionate defender of Indigenous rights and culture. He spent his life fighting for equality for his people. Kerry Campbell reports.
In his backyard along the banks of Johnston's River sits one of John Joe Sark's final projects, an unfinished shrine to St. Katari Tekakwitha, a 17th century Mohawk woman that Sark helped to make the first Indigenous person ever canonized. Sark was a devout Catholic, but it didn't stop him from appearing before Pope John Paul II seeking an apology for the Church's role in the residential school system.
Handed him written presentation on the people that went to the residential school.
2 popes and nearly 3 decades later, that apology finally came. Sark was from a long line of hereditary chiefs, including the grandfather who raised him. He went on to help draft the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but John Joe's activism started much earlier in his teen years, after police in Summerside arrested his grandfather after he suffered a stroke and assumed he was drunk. John Joe spoke to CBC about it in 2005.
Staggered and fell down. They put him in jail. And they put him in jail because he was a Mi'kmaq. He had taken a stroke. And ever since then, I think, it's a wonder I don't hate authority. But I think I knew then there's something wrong with our society.
Island Mi'kmaqs have said they are offended by what they call a racist and...
In 1990, Sark took on Charlottetown Rural High, successfully getting the school to rename its sports teams from the Redmen to the Raiders, and to ditch their logo, the same caricature of an Indigenous chief still used by the Chicago Blackhawks.
He was willing to take up those fights, to take up those actions, to bring words where they were needed to make sure that there was positive changes.
Sark's niece, Julie Pellisier-Lush, says her uncle understood the importance of symbols and wanted to create a world where his grandchildren would be viewed as equals.
And he said, I might not win every battle, but I'll win a couple.
No fight was too big, no racist image too small to draw Sark's attention, like a small toy of an Indigenous man wielding a tomahawk inside a Kinder Surprise. Sark convinced the company to take those out of production. Or the scene in the Anne of Green Gables musical where white actors appeared on stage as cartoonish stereotypes of Mi'kmaq characters.
If they don't want to spend the time and investment in having Native actors properly play that role, then take the goddamn scene out.
The producers removed the scene.
With John Joe, he will be greatly missed by our people.
John Joe's nephew, Benny Sark, says he'll continue with his uncle's activism. John Joe nominated Benny to take his spot on the Mi'kmaq Grand Council, a regional body of hereditary chiefs.
Always going. He was unrelentless, and he didn't like to take no for an answer. I'm proud for this position, to carry that on.
Kerry Campbell, CBC News, Charlottetown.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio 1. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. The war in Ukraine has upended lives and scattered people all over the globe. Many have ended up here in Canada and sometimes in unlikely places. George Moratis brings us the story of a Ukrainian couple who escaped the trauma of war to build a new life in Canada's north.
The next generation of Yukon breakers are being put through their paces at the Heart of Riverdale Community Center in Whitehorse. Leading them is Oleksiy Ogarov. This time last year, he was teaching and dancing in his home country of Ukraine.
It was pretty nice life.
That all changed in February.
Across Ukraine, the sounds of war. The dead are already being counted.
Ogarov took shelter in a basement, guarding his life and 40 others.
Hear the whistle, like you just wake up everyone and everybody run out. When the war starts, I tell you truth, I don't want to dance anymore. I stay like 3 weeks in this basement and think about what I can do in my life, other things. I have no passion to dance. I don't want to do this.
Then one night, some good fortune via social media.
And just sweeping Instagram news.
A job posting for dance instructors in the Yukon right there on his feed. He messaged Heart of Riverdale founder Andrea Simpson-Fowler.
And I was like gonna hire somebody else, and then they came and I was like, oh my God.
And was right away straight got answer from Andrea. And I was like, wow, even for 1 minute I got answer. So cool.
We did an interview and I just knew that they were the right people. Could you imagine that? They're in the basement of their building and they're doing an interview for a job in another country and they're talking about like how much they love the dance.
It's been 6 months since Ogarov and his wife arrived in Whitehorse.
Do Zulu spin now. In one side 3 turns, then we switch side 3 turns in the other side.
They fit in excellent. I mean, they're just good people.
I really miss to my home, for sure. But here's some special, and I thought it will be hard to have a long night and very short day. But in real life, it's easy, and just also just because of we have a lot of work, which we really like. I feel pretty good.
Our hearts now is Heart of Riverdale, and we are so grateful to these people.
George Moratis, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Is this the greatest diss track ever? Shakira, taking the genre to another level in this collaboration with Argentinian DJ Bizarrap. It's a scathing critique of her ex, Spanish soccer star Gerard Piqué. They've been together a decade, had 2 kids. Now he's dating a woman half Shakira's age, which is 45. But who needs a man when you've got lyrics like this?
Sorry, baby, hace rato que yo te vi tocar ese gato.
Yeah, it's mostly in Spanish, so let us be your Google Translate for some of the best lines. A she-wolf like me isn't for guys like you. I'm worth 2 22-year-olds. Lots of time at the gym, but your brain needs a little work too. You traded a Rolex for a Casio. Piqué's responded by saying his Casio is for life.
Casio nos ha dado relojes.
And Casio's now sponsoring his fantasy soccer tournament. Cute. But Shakira's song is nearing 100 million views on YouTube, where it's already been declared the most watched new Latin song ever. As she sings, women don't cry anymore. They get paid. Thanks for the life lesson, Shakira. Your tips don't lie. And you've been listening to The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.